we're live. Let's check. Always the awkward part of these videos. How do we figure it out?
Just refresh the screen.
Hi everyone! While we figure out whether or not we are indeed live, which I pretty consistently have trouble with,
We might be live, we might be
I think
live.
we're live. I think we're live. I'm Elena Urioste, a tutor for the foundation. This is the amazing Tom Foster, pianist, my husband, and we are going to chat with you today all about chamber music and the many joys and difficulties and all that good stuff. So while you're coming in, we thought we'd start off just by playing for you a bit. This is the first of the 3 Clara Schumann romances for violin and piano, and we will rehearse it a little bit later, and we'll just tell you more as we go along, but let's just start with a little music, shall we? Hi everyone, if you're just coming in, I'm Elena Urioste.
I'm Tom Foster.
And that was the first of the 3 romances for violin and piano by the great Clara Schumann, one of our very favorite things to play together. So this is a session all about chamber music. We have the very maybe unusual situation of being married to each other, but we loved playing chamber music with each other long before that. In fact, it's how we met. We met actually on a blind date recording session. We had a couple hours to put some pieces together, and then we were expected to record it. So actually, it was a really amazing start to our relationship, having to be able to communicate with each other, not just through our instruments, but through our voices, in a way that was efficient and hopefully kind. I don't know, were we nice to each other? I think we were nice.
I think we were nice to each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
It has been my experience, at least among my friends and colleagues, that chamber music, which literally means music to be played in one's chambers, very appropriate. We are in our chambers right now. We're at home. And it's music on an intimate, small scale, a few instruments playing together. And I feel that it is just the greatest joy within classical music. I mean, I love it all. I love playing concertos. I think you feel the same way. People love playing in orchestra or in front of orchestras, music on a big, big scale. But there's something incredibly special about coming together in a more intimate setting and going on a journey with your colleagues, with your friends, and creating something like a little jewel together. And that, I think, is what the essence of chamber music really is. And it's no wonder that so many people say it's their favorite way of making music. It feels the most honest and satisfying.
And hopefully when you heard us playing that little piece, you could hear how much of it was about dialogue and about give and take. That really is what this piece is about. But I think as students, we often sort of learn our own part on its own. Sometimes we don't think all that much about the fact that we're going to be playing with someone else, sort of responding and listening to them. And I think, as a pianist, I hope this is right to say, but I think it's often string players that sort of take their own part on its own, and sometimes a violinist who's learning a piece, just their own part, might forget that the violin part is only 50% of the music. And actually, if we counted up all the notes, we might find it's even a bit less than 50%. So the piano has at least half of the musical material, the special material that makes the music what it is.
Definitely. And at least this might be just my personal opinion. Even if it is a piece that's written for the violin to, you know, showcase the technical wizardry or the melodic features of the violin, I believe no matter what the other people in the room are playing, even if it's just doo-dee, 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 doo-dee on the piano, we are still making music together. And whoever you are playing with has likely gone through years and years and years of practicing really hard and training just like you, no matter what instrument. So we really have to respect whoever we are playing with, however we may perceive their part that's written out.
And I think it's a really funny thing that when we play trios, if you play a piano trio or a string trio, everyone accepts it's three equal voices, and yet there's this funny thing that sometimes when we play just two people, and one of them is a pianist and the other one isn't, for reasons I'll sort of come on to after this, the pianist has sort of historically sometimes been regarded as slightly less important, slightly in the background. So just by way of a little demonstration, we're going to play what I think is one of the most beautiful sonatas for piano and violin, which is, of course, how it was intended by Brahms. So this is the Brahms A major sonata, and we're just going to play you the opening. So just have a listen to this. So, I'm sorry we can't ask you the questions, but I'm hoping that if we asked you which is the main voice in that opening, and you've just been listening to it, I'm hoping you might say the piano. And if you did, you'd be entirely right. And it's very easy when we come to this fresh to hear with our own ears the main voice is the piano. The piano is singing the song, and the violin is giving these beautiful little answering phrases. I think the problem comes when sometimes we grow up thinking that the piano is in the background and a sort of accompanying instrument, so we forget sort of how to listen objectively. And I think that's something that leads to, for example, in this piece, violinists saying,
"Oh, Brahms A major sonata, is that the one that goes like this?" And
which
then
of
you
course is the
very
answering
silly.
phrase. It's not really the tune. And indeed, I have had violinist colleagues, definitely not Elena, who refer to anything before the violin has the tune as the introduction. You know, I suppose if you really sort of had grown up with that mindset, I guess you could think that was the introduction to, but you'd end up sounding a bit silly. So that's sort of a way of saying that I think almost all music is really about dialogue and collaboration, about equal voices. One of the things it has to be said is that almost all the great composers were pianists. Some of them were also violinists, but almost without exception they were pianists. So if we think about what the composers thought about the piano, which was often their main instrument, it's very unlikely they wanted it in the background. In fact, they always intended it to be very much central, if not the dominant voice. So in fact, Mozart described what we now call the Mozart violin sonatas as sonatas for piano with violin accompaniment. That's how he would have thought of it. Beethoven and Brahms both write sonatas for piano and violin. They would have seen the piano, if anything, as being the dominant instrument. But then somewhere in the 19th century, people like Paganini come along and they want to be the star. They want to be the celeb. So anyone else, and that's sort of, I mean, that's really how celebrity culture starts. The idea of, you know, this one person being the star and everyone else being sort of slightly in the background.
Definitely, and if you have a personality like Paganini's, as we discussed over the virtual sessions, you know, someone who is devilish and virtuosic and, you know, debonair, probably handsome. He had a very magnetic personality, so, you know, it would be hard to kind of shine alongside him. So
I'd definitely be in the background if I was playing Paganini, and that would be fine, you know.
But yes, it was musicians sort of that ilk who were very magnetic and had that star power that may have, I mean, in some ways, done a lot to further the capabilities of the instrument. And it's not just the violin. You know, there were equivalent cellists and singers and pianists who you know really brought into fashion this idea of showing off, and that's wonderful. But it definitely it shouldn't mean that all music should be viewed like that, with one star and a bunch of people in the background. By and large, music is much more equal and collaborative, and
what that's led to in the modern age, actually, we were just doing some research about this. If you Google CD covers for recordings of the Brahms sonatas for piano and violin, one of which we just played to you, you know, you can hear from the music that it's two equal voices, it's an equal duet. But so many of the covers have a big photo of the violinist, no photo of the pianist. The violinist's name in big letters, the pianist's name in tiny letters. And to be honest, we've got a bit used to that, but it's honestly as weird as if, like, they re-released recordings of the Amadeus Quartet, and on the cover they only showed 3 of the Amadeus Quartet, and the other one was like in smaller print and not shown in the photo. It's as wrong as that musically. So I think, I know I sound a bit like the sort of feminist equivalent of pianist.
you should.
Which yes, I would argue that feminism is probably a more important issue than pianist equality, but still, it's not totally sort of unrelated, actually. Just this idea of sort of deconstructing the language we use. And I would say the most problematic word, really, is accompanist. And it's very strange that if you're a violinist, whether you're playing solo Bach or string quartets or in an orchestra or a concerto in front of an orchestra, anything, whatever you're playing, you're a violinist. Mm-hmm. If you're a pianist, if you play a solo recital, or if you play a trio, or if you play a concerto, or if you play songs, you're a pianist. But somehow, if you play with one other person, you suddenly become an accompanist. And that's a really weird thing. So I think one of the things we could do is try to abolish the word accompanist. I think that would definitely help.
Yeah. You know what else we could abolish?
What?
The possessive. You know, I will say, like, Tom, this is, again, as I said, a sort of special case because I would describe you as my husband. You are my husband. I think you would probably also say my wife from time to time. Mm-hmm. But what I wouldn't do is ever call you my pianist. Sorry, we say pianist in American, pianist. I would never say my pianist. I feel very weird about that. Like I have ownership over your pianism.
But actually that happens a lot. And
would you call me
I have
my violinist?
No, I wouldn't. But I have plenty of colleagues who have referred to me as my pianist. Now, I know they mean it very nicely. Actually, I'm secretly very flattered that they think I mean that way. But it is just another sort of extension of that linguistic thing. That, pianists never say, oh, this is my violinist, or this is my singer. And yet so many singers will just say, oh, this is my pianist, without a second thought. So I think that's just all sort of around the linguistic things. What I would say is, if you can avoid saying my accompanist and therefore thinking of them as someone that's sort of in a supporting role, and just say, this is a pianist called,
This is Tom.
So this has all been a bit sort of about linguistic things, which I actually do think matter, because I think it's about a whole attitude of sort of equality, but it's mostly just about the music, and that's what the music deserves, and that's what the composers deserve, really. That I think so often we're focused in our training about our own instrumental skills, and we get so focused in our own part. But actually, everything about musical training should be about the give and take. So hopefully you heard in the Brahms, and especially in the Clara Schumann, where it's so much music of equals, that it's all about that dialogue and that sort of sensitivity to your musical partner. I think even at the earlier stages of first putting things together with a pianist, actually, you really listening to each other. Sometimes you can even end up listening to the other person more than listening to yourself. And there's something so inspiring and so comforting about that, I think.
Yeah, I also think it's sort of, in many ways, the goal of music. Like, why do we put all this work into playing music? I mean, I can count maybe on one hand the number of string players, certainly, that I know who go through their entire lives only having, like, strictly solo careers. I can't imagine spending my life only playing, solo Bach or Isai or Paganini, just never playing with another human being. We put in all of this, blood, sweat, and tears, working so hard to further our craft so that then we can play with other people. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's the ultimate goal. So whether your goal is to play with others in a section of an orchestra, or to be a concerto soloist, or to play chamber music, or ideally some combination of the three, so that you get you get to see all of the amazing ways that it's possible to share music with other people. I think the ultimate goal really is collaboration in some sense. So it's really important to build those skills, not only musically, but with your voice as well, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But did you want to touch on various ways that two instruments, in our case a violin and piano, can kind of feed off each other, and different dynamics that they can have? Definitely.
And I think what we're going to do maybe in a little while is just try and have a little kind of open rehearsal, so we can show you the sort of things we might discuss together as we explore music. But I think a lot of what we have to think about when we're collaborating is how the two instruments relate to each other. And I thought we'd sort of illustrate that with a couple of very famous sonatas and sort of openings of duo sonatas. So there are definitely times when, as the two instruments, we're trying to be one voice, one instrument. And I think the opening of the Mozart E minor sonata is one of the really good examples of that. So we need to rehearse, but that's definitely a phrase where in rehearsal what you'll be wanting to do is work out how to blend these sort of seemingly very different sounds into one voice, to really match the articulation, to match the shape, to match the colour. So I'd really be sort of watching Elena's bow and working out, how can I try to emulate that bow stroke on this keyboard instrument?
Yeah, and the responsibility wouldn't be entirely yours. I would also be watching Tom's hands, his fingers on the keys, to see exactly what would it be like if I imagined playing the violin like a keyboard. How would I attack not attack, but, well, you know what I mean, attack, not but but how would I approach the start of the note to make it blend with the keyboard? This is one of those pieces that we definitely might not want to default towards the sort of diva behavior of a violinist that we were talking about before, you know, just like kind of going nuts and layering on the vibrato. Should we maybe...
Yeah, this is going to be really old school, where Elena really thinks she's Paganini, and I'm this sort of self-effacing.
My accompanist, yeah. Not ideal, I think.
Not ideal, because I think, as you hear, we want to really sort of come together as one. And I think maybe that's a good point to mention the tempo issue, which is that I think also from quite a young age, sometimes we get used to, you know, as pianists, we get used to saying to the violinist, so what speed do you want this? Or the violinist will just say, this is the speed I take this. But actually in a piece like this, it would be very much something you'd want to arrive at together, you know. And actually in the piano part there are things like this. These repeated notes that might dictate the tempo more than what speed the violinist fancies playing that opening phrase at. Yeah. So I think to really from the very beginning to think of it as collaboration. What tempo works for both of us? And sometimes one person might have to make a compromise, but I think, you know, it's the tempo that works for the duo and for the combination of instruments.
Yeah, and I think often you can only come to these conclusions by trying a lot of things. By, of course, coming into the rehearsal prepared, knowing what the other person has, and having you know, a clear sense of how you think the piece might go, ideally to you, but also to have enough flexibility to try a bunch of different things, because you might land at something that you actually like much better than what you thought it had to be like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a piece where you'd be very much wanting to create a unified voice. There are other examples of pieces. I think we're going to play the opening of the Strauss Sonata, where it's very much two voices in dialogue. And sometimes the voices might be able to express their own lines and not necessarily sort of line up at every sort of meeting point. So they can follow their own expression. So I think playing together, isn't it, we always sort of think initially it's about being exactly together and, you know, strictly, you know, we have to meet at this point. But there might be times when actually the lines are so independently expressive that we can dare to actually take risks and take a little time and not expect the other person to go exactly, you know, to have to follow, but both follow our own path.
Exactly, but with a similar intention.
Exactly.
I think when you talk about playing together, it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, it has to be metronomic like this, and like you said, it doesn't have to line up exactly, but the togetherness comes from having a collective experience in mind, a collective sound, and maybe imagery or intention.
Yeah, and if you agree on that and you discuss, you know, an image or an emotion, actually you're much more likely to end up playing together than if you go, okay, let's count for, you know,
that
2.5 beats and then, you know, so I think it's, that's exactly it. Strauss, if I can remember it. Little improvising on my part, but I hope that's sort of clear that it's such a sort of different texture from the Mozart unison, you know, where there are all these lines sort of intertwining, and actually one of the things that's less important is, does every note perfectly line up and is everything matched? It's about, you know, expressing, and okay, we were maybe overdoing it a couple of moments. If we were to rehearse that, we might tone it down a little, but I hope that sort of gives you, some idea of the different approaches you might take.
So speaking of a rehearsal, should we maybe rehearse something that we do have the music for in front of us?
That.
All right, so we'll return to the Clara Schumann, and we thought it might be fun, I don't know, enlightening, something, to kind of give you a window into our rehearsal technique, which of course is very specific to us. As I said, we have kind of an underlying personal relationship, but in some ways, the fact that we do spend a lot of time together, not playing our instruments, makes it all the more important that we find a way of communicating verbally that is kind and patient, because, you know, we can't just storm out of rehearsal and vow never to see each other again. We have to live with each other and all that stuff. So I think chamber music is one of the most amazing opportunities to practice cultivating your voice, as I said, and also just sort of practice living in like this little mini microcosm of the whole world. Playing chamber music and rehearsing chamber music teaches you so many skills, like how to come to a democratic decision, how to make your opinions heard in a clear and efficient way, but also a way that's kind and compassionate. It helps you to kind of, well, it shines a light on the fact that not everyone processes things in the same way. There might be language barriers. Even, you know, we both speak English, but you would be amazed at how many different ways there are of saying things, even just like different words from England to America, but also just kind of the way in which we deliver things. So it's just really...
Americans are very direct compared to the English. Often.
Yeah. So we'll exaggerate some of these things as we rehearse. But just getting a feel for the other people that you're playing with, both musically, but also just kind of their vibe and how they are most receptive to ideas and suggestions. So
and you'll hear in this very first phrase, it's really my question and Elena's answer. So one of the things I'd be thinking, even before I started, is how can I pass this phrase, or how can I make this phrase so inviting that Elena wants to come in and answer this phrase?
Well, you know what? I actually think I can do better. I would love to. You did such a nice job of handing it off to me, and I was kind of like mousy. So,
Okay.
Can we try it one more time?
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a way there, because we finished the first phrase, of not having the momentum stop entirely. Like, I think we should end the phrase, but rather than have it be a pause, be more of like a refuel.
Definitely. And I was going to say that after these first sort of 6 bars where we're in dialogue, sort of one after the other, this moment where we come together in 6 could be much more of a sort of unified duet.
Definitely. And we can make maybe even more of the harmonic change. This is a pet peeve of Tom's that if you ever play with Tom, don't do this. Sorry, can I see in your...
Actually, that's not. I would rather you looked at the score than didn't look at the score at all.
But it is like I'm actually breaking a rule because I left my piano score back in Philadelphia. So I don't have
violinist nicking pencils off the piano and not returning.
Yeah, bring your own pencil.
Really...
But it is helpful for people to have a score, even if it's on an iPad. You know, if it's an IMSLP thing.
And actually, that's a really weird thing that pianists, we always have the violin part, so we know what you're doing. And
yeah,
you
but
just
what am
have
I
your
doing
own
with this like
so,
silly line? So
actually,
I really should be just playing from the score,
or at least having studied the score, so you know what I'm doing. Which you have.
Sorry. But what I was going to say is on that harmonic change, maybe that can be even fuller just to announce the...
Which harmonic? Okay,
I don't remember. Where do you want to start?
Just once more from the top so we can get that sort of going together then.
actually, well, first of all, I was just like really enjoying that. So, so I wasn't even thinking of what we could potentially work on. But it came to my mind that I think just as a tip for communicating in chamber music, if something comes up that you're not necessarily satisfied with or would like to hear in a different way, it's always more productive to offer a constructive suggestion rather than just being like, I didn't like that. Or like, that was too slow. Or, ugh. Not that I'm sure none of you would do that. But I have been in rehearsals where people have been like, that was bad. Or like, I didn't like that.
I feel like Americans do that more.
Maybe. I mean, they were Americans.
Whereas British people, if they want to criticise the other person,
it takes like 15 minutes.
Firstly, firstly we say, oh, I loved everything like what you did. But maybe this thing. But the other thing we do to try to disguise that we're actually saying it to you is, I'll say something like, oh, maybe we could move forward a bit more here. And actually, it might be a passage where I'm not playing at all. But it's just, it's just one of those little, anyway.
But that ties in what we were saying, like the importance of language. It might not seem like that big of a deal, but I've definitely learned so much about this from you. You absolutely empower people and lift people up when you play with them. I've never ever heard you say that was something negative. I
mean, that's nice to hear, but I'm sure I have colleagues that I have said the wrong things to, or said. I've certainly always tried to learn from mistakes, but I think we've all been in rehearsals where we've said something and realised we've hurt someone's
Definitely.
feelings. And when we've been kind of really hurt by a direct criticism of something we thought we'd done quite beautifully,
and all it takes is just saying, like, I'm sorry, like, I didn't mean that, or that wasn't how I meant to say it.
I mean, the same as in any friendship group, sitting around the dinner table, you can have exactly the same, you can
exactly.
offend people if you say things insensitively. What I was thinking when we were playing that passage is how hard it is to get the balance between finding all these special moments but still finding the flow. So I think in such an expressive piece, sometimes, in every bar there's something you want to bring out or something you want to take time over. But I think when we both do that,
it's getting
sometimes you lose this kind of flow. So I think that, and a lot of romantic music, well, music in general, is a kind of consideration. Sometimes I think it's helpful to also try stripping back and playing something more simply.
Totally agree.
More flow. And then just adding little by little the really necessary and what's really sort of implied in the score.
Should we? I actually, to that point, sometimes the most effective way of rehearsing isn't doing a lot of chatting like we've just been doing, but rather just to do it another time, because you might be. One of my big pet peeves is I'll do something once, like for the first time, and someone will start to pick it apart. And I want to be like, but how do you know I'm even going to do that again? If something becomes a pattern or is clearly a habit, then I think it's worth maybe bringing up for debate. But sometimes we could just do it again, and it might be better.
Yeah.
Could we go from the bar 11?
Yes. I feel that might be,
Yeah.
Just.
Oh, did you not find that interesting?
I don't think it's not melodic, but I think maybe
this
is even more expressive. So,
I agree.
Just the upbeat to that.
Oh, sure.
I think that's a very special moment, those two bars, because I think what Clara is doing is quoting her husband Robert Schumann's first violin sonata. Do you want... And Clarice's? So I think there's something very significant and personal about them that maybe we could find some even more special colour.
Absolutely. Should we do that once? And then I can't believe we've passed 35 minutes already.
Oh right. Okay, well...
Let's...
Sure. Animato?
Yes.
Great.
Well, we have yammered quite a lot, but we would love to hear from any of you if there are any questions.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, Brent. Oh my gosh.
Oh wow.
We will come to the comments. Why can't I ever figure out?
Comments, where are you? Wait, if we get... Do you want to grab my phone? I'll grab my phone.
Okay.
You can keep talking.
Yeah, it's funny, like, obviously rehearsal dynamics change even if one person is added, so it's interesting, like, welcoming in a window into just me and Tom and how we rehearse, which, to be totally honest, is usually, not very language oriented. We do a lot of just playing and then playing again and just trying to listen as best we can rather than talking a lot. But of course this really varies from person to person. We've played with people who do quite like discussing things, rehearsing things, doing things in small sections. So it's really very dependent on the person and just being open-minded and patient with each other.
Yeah.
Kind, but assertive. I think just finding that balance.
I can't see all the comments.
Very weird.
What is your favourite thing about chamber music? That's a nice question.
Go for it.
My favourite thing about chamber music is, I think as musicians, music making can be quite lonely because we're spending so much time ourselves in our instrument and sort of turning inwards. And I think I just love the companionship. It's not that I love solo piano repertoire as well, but I think, I think really my greatest happiness is that idea that you can sort of lift each other to greater heights of inspiration than you might be able to find on your own. The sort of idea of the whole being greater than the sum of the parts. And I think with chamber music that can really be the case. And I think, as musicians we all struggle with ups and downs, and you can really help each other through a lot of things, sort of both on and off stage. And I think I've learned so much, life lessons and music lessons from the people I've worked with. It's an unbelievable amount, actually.
Yeah, and I would also say that I find it very empowering in chamber music that you get full ownership together over the finished product. Whereas if you're in an orchestra, often you're deferring to someone else's voice, whether it's the conductor or your section leader. But in chamber music, you get to steer the ship the whole time. And to me, a performance at the end of that feels all the more satisfying because you've seen it through at every stage, from your own preparation to the finished product. So I just find it very empowering, and it just sits more deeply with me than almost anything else, I would say.
Yeah. There's a pair of questions here. What's your favourite thing to play together? Oh, and favourite composer as well, someone asked. And is there a piece you would never play together? There are definitely pieces we'd never play together.
I mean, we've also found a sort of... We definitely love playing things that are quite melodic.
Sort of lyrical works, I think we sort of gravitate towards.
Yeah.
I think we love singing out melodies on our instruments.
Mm-hmm. Things that make us feel kind of cozy and warm.
And as a pianist, I'm always sort of learning so much from string players and from singers and from wind players too about trying to make this funny percussive instrument sing, and so I think anything with sort of singing lines. So some of our favourite sonatas, I suppose, Strauss sonata, which we played you a bit of, the Brahms G major, which has just some of the most glorious melodies of all time.
Yeah. And then smaller,
Loved
more
playing
kind of salon pieces.
The Grieg sonatas.
The
We've
Grieg.
recorded all the Grieg sonatas recently. They're wonderful.
Yeah.
And no one plays the first two. They're so wonderful.
Things we wouldn't play together.
Is there anything on the shelf? Let's see.
I will never participate in anything by Paganini. Like weirdly, except the 24th Caprice, the slow part. You kind of aren't so much into minimalism, I would say. So you probably won't find us playing that.
Yeah, I've got a piece that I know I'm thinking about that is on the shelf that I know I will never play.
But I think it could also be really great to challenge ourselves to play darker, spikier, angry music.
Which I think the Prokofiev first sonata we played together actually, and that's a pretty dark, ghostly piece.
Yeah.
Extraordinary music.
So I would say there isn't too much that we would rule out entirely.
Yeah, I mean there are certain composers I would say don't speak so directly to my heart, but in case they're composers that you adore, I'm not going to name them.
Yeah.
Because we all have different things that speak to us.
Yeah, and that other people bring out of us, I would say.
Yeah. I think those are all the questions that I can see. But yeah, maybe I had one closing thought, and maybe you also do.
Go for it.
But I just think it is really important from the very earliest stage of music making to really work on the sort of collaboration element and sort of listening to other musicians and learning ways to work with other musicians. And I think ultimately, honestly, it's what, for me, I judge sort of musicians, not success, but certainly how much I want to work with people by when I see that. And I think, we have this sort of often this competition mindset when we're students that, we think everyone wants to hear us playing like as fast and as loud and as brilliantly as possible and sort of showing what we can do. But my little anecdote is that I remember watching the BBC Young Musicians string final, it must be nearly 10 years ago now, the year that Laura van der Heyden won. And I think some of you know Laura because she's been on some of these chats with us. But I remember that was the first time I heard Laura, and there were 5 wonderful string players playing, all really outstanding. And they all had this sort of brilliance and everything. But I just remember Laura started playing. She played the slow movement of a Brahms sonata, the F major sonata for piano and cello, and it was so beautiful. But it wasn't about she made the richest sound. It was just about the fact that she was in every moment she was listening to the pianist, and so often in that movement the piano has the tune, and it was like she was just at one with her pianist. There was no sense that this wasn't an absolutely equal duo partnership, and that made such an impression on me. And the first thing I thought was, I really want to play with her, and now she's one of our
favorite
closest
people
collaborators. Yeah. So I think those things, to really see that someone's listening and reacting and responding and has that sort of give and take, that can be the most memorable and most powerful way of making an impact, far more than the loudest, fastest thing in the world.
Yeah, I mean, you said it all. That's what music's all about, I feel. So, thank you for coming to our rehearsal. Yes. It was lovely to share this time with you, and yeah,
it's been a joy. So I wish we could see you in real life. But thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you. Make some chamber music. Yeah. Be nice to each other.
Yeah.
Assert yourselves with compassion, and you'll be good for all of life, I think, probably.
Exactly.
Cool. That's your lesson for the day. Bye.
Bye.